Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Just Another Kill Team podcast, connecting kill team communities across the globe. If you're passionate about the tactical skirmish game that brings together strategy, lore, and creativity, you are in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and stay updated with our latest episodes. If you want to support the show, check out our Patreon. Your support means a lot to us. Follow us by using the social media links in the podcast description for all the latest news, and be sure to leave a review to let us know what you think. All right, you guys, I want to take a quick moment to let you all know about Crossfire Games that is sponsoring this episode, a couple additional episodes as well. Crossfire Games makes some super cool tokens, token holders, measuring tools, all sorts of awesome goodies. They're super, super cool, really like high-quality 3D printed stuff. You can grab it from the Etsy link in the show notes and use the coupon code JUSTANOTHERKILLTEAM, all one word, all uppercase, at checkout to get a little discount and to help us out. Thanks for tuning in. Here's today's episode.
And our kill team scene was just me showing up every week by myself for like the first 6 months. And anybody that was looking at a Warhammer box would be like, you want to learn how to play? I've got 4 different teams here. We can learn how to play. And now, 2 years later, we have like consistently 15 to 20 people 3 days a week.
Hey, 3 days a week. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of those there's nothing that beats time and consistency when trying to build a community, because people have to trust that their time is not being wasted. And that's a hard pill for people who are used to kind of like internet structures to swallow when transitioning into being a real life person.
Yep. And that was a huge push for me to even do it in the first place, because I used to be almost exclusively into video games. I worked in video games. And when I left that industry, it was like, okay, well, how do I make real life friends and hang out with people? And it's like, well, painting models and learning how to play Kill Team was a good vehicle. So I just showed up and let people know.
Did you start in Kill Team 2021, or did you start a little later?
Or like,
did you all the way at the beginning, or like somewhere in the middle? I guess. Sorry.
Right after the first Worlds. Yeah.
The 8-person worlds, or there's a couple different first worlds.
The one wasn't it in Mexico?
Okay, yeah, that is the first world. So there were 8 of us, and it's been erased from history.
Yeah, I heard about that after the fact, but that was the time frame when I started.
Yeah, I mean, the journey of Kill Team has been a long storied one at this point for a lot of our listeners, and for you and for me and Jason. You know, we started a little after the first Worlds, and you know, now Jason has gone to Worlds.
Awesome, congratulations!
What a time!
And now you're a local TO, and you're going to be out a ticket to Worlds. When is the ticket coming out? I forget. Yours is in the
March.
Near-ish.
Yeah, March 8th and 9th.
Okay, very soon, very soon.
Extremely soon.
How many people do you guys have so far? How big is your venue? You know, what are your kind of like trials and tribulations as a new TO, kind of bringing your scene up?
For me, we'll start with the venue. It's fairly large because they run Kill Team and Age of Sigmar events twice a year out of there as well. So we have 64 tickets available. I think we've sold 22 so far. And we've got 3 weeks left. So I'm hoping that we can sell at least 40. That's what I'm aiming for. From the TO side, organizing wasn't difficult. It was making sure that I wasn't leading players astray with rules and rulings, and just knowing what I needed to know ahead of time, because that's every single time you find a niche rule that is going to make you take a pause and pull out the book, it's going to happen in a tournament. So I've just been trying to study that as much as possible. But with this tournament, I'm pretty confident because I'll have Brendan Bean there with me as the head TO. And he knows the rules better than most people. He's been to Worlds twice. Incredible player. So having him there, huge asset.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on anyways was to talk a little bit about how you get to rulings and how to do it quickly, and maybe talk about some of the more challenging ones and maybe some of the more interesting ones of this edition. Jumping probably comes up, whether or not you can jump over barricades, through doors, all sorts of silly stuff is showing up. And I know we talked a little bit before the podcast about some rulings, maybe around door fighting, that at least at Worlds we were pretty consistent about getting rules on, since we had somebody from, we had the ability to ping people further away to give us steadier rules answers.
Yeah, that I if I get my goal this year is to go to Worlds as a player, and if that happens, I'm going to strategically bring up rules questions all game, every game.
Well, many players did that at Worlds, so I think it's pretty. That's one of the fun thing about Worlds is players who go generally can go back to their local scenes with at least a more concise, narrower version of the rules that doesn't have as many niche questions floating around. Although by the time we get to this World, we'll be a year into the new edition, because we were able to run Worlds on 3 months of the new edition, so probably fewer rules questions, one would hope.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is second edition still had these kind of things, but they were consistently trying to answer them all the time without completely rewriting the game. So I have full faith that they'll handle it again this time. But when it comes to these like niche interactions, I try to 100% lead with intent as what is most fair to both players at the time. If I can't get a ruling straight from the book, I would say like 8 out of 10 rules questions, I just either know the answer or know where to look. Usually in the way these rules are formatted, you've helped teach me this stuff as well when I've asked you about it. Things like not parsing the rule into different sections based on punctuation, but reading the entire rule and then applying those rules. But then there's just weird ones where it's like, oh, well, if it references move, what does that mean? Is it capitalized? Does this mean a reposition?
Folded.
Exactly. One that just came up recently it was very confusing, but I figured it out, was the Hernkyn dozer can move other models. He essentially is punching them in the face.
Him and the Crusher from the Wrecker Crew can move people around.
Just Dragon Ball Z punching.
Exactly. So in that moment, I was like, does that mean he can just move them 3 inches in any direction he wants, regardless of terrain and things like that? And then a local player, Grant, was digging through the book with me and was like, well, in the basis section of the rules, it does say that models cannot move over enemy models or through terrain unless you are using a specific action. So that's where I was like, okay, you can move the model, but if you interact with either of those two things, you can't go through them. And that allowed it to be very consistent. It's like, no, you can't punch somebody over a barricade unless it's a void dancer. But also that applies to void dancers where every climb is 1 inch for them. So you could punch them over any wall. It does count.
Definitely a fun one. Let me hold on.
That's like
making me want to.
Narratively, it's like you're not even punching them. You're just like dangling them over a wall and like yelling at them.
Yeah,
and throwing them.
Swear to me. But if it's something that I can't figure out in the moment, just from reading the actual text, things like, oh, 2 models have a fight first, which one comes first? It's like, well, in the old edition, that would be an issue. But in the new edition, it specifically says when this model is retaliating, it can resolve a dice first. You can never retaliate when you're the attacker. So it's pretty simple to say that it's a defense-only system.
Yeah, and then when it comes to something like the strongholds on Volcus, when you're defending from the inside, it specifically says when you are retaliating, you go first. So it gets kind of around. There's some of the timing issues go away. Not all the timing issues, but luckily now we have precedence, at least as the last step before we just say initiative holder takes it.
Yeah, and I've only seen a few of those situations come up that don't involve 2 people playing the same faction. Like, I sat next to 2 people playing Khazarkin versus Khazarkin at LVO. I think they called over Dakota 10 times Even something as simple as re-rolling initiative. It's like, well, who gets to go first or who gets to use it?
Oh, interesting. I think, let's see. Let's look at it.
His decision was who has initiative from the previous turning point.
Yeah. I think that's probably where I would go to. I think that like holds the intent of the rule.
Exactly. It seemed the most fair. Yeah. And that's where you have to come to when you can't make a true decision, is just what's the most fair. It doesn't even matter if it's rules as written. It's like, what's going to produce the least amount of feels bads for both players in that moment. I know everybody wants to win, but if it's something like that you need to win, then you probably made some major mistakes somewhere else. There's ones that we're writing a document for this tournament that are just straight up, yes, this is the rules as written, but I don't agree with it.
Yeah,
door fighting.
That's how I did the New York Open rulings. It was, there's the raw, there's the rules as intended, and there's what I actually think they want. And I basically let players pick. Like, if you ask me in a tournament setting, I will give you the raw answer 100% of the time, unless there's a very obvious rules as intended way of looking at it, which generally comes from the core rulebook and orange text floating around, or even the developer's commentary for the team, since Vespid, Caster, or Tempestus Aquilons, Rekka Crew, and Rattlings all have designer's commentary attached to them. You can kind of glean what they want out of some of the situations when there's question marks.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that and try to do that as much as possible. One that I've seen floating around that I just flat out, I'll tell them ahead of time it's not allowed, is door fighting, but measuring from the top of the door to fight somebody on a vantage.
Yeah, I think at Worlds we basically said that it's only the bottom frame of the door that counts for where you can fight from. But I could definitely see the argument in the other way. And in fact, at New York Open, I did rule it the other way. But now I will just say that it's be on the floor, just because it keeps it, it seems like the intent of the rule.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're within 2 inches of the door if there's a light vantage in the way and you can't even see the door. And control range usually solves a lot of those issues, because you need to be able to see something to be in control range of it. So there's
not door fights critically enough.
Yeah, it's strange. But that's something that I feel confident in ruling, where if it came to the designers to have a comment on it, if and when they do, they would rule in my favor, because it's just fair play intent on the game.
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting change of pace, because in the last edition of Kill Team, starting in 2021, generally the rulings were very close to whatever the raw was, but there was no real rules as intent situation. I think there was like that small period of time when they talked about vantages having light cover and everybody rioted, and they changed it back to having no light cover, and now here we are in the next edition. Everyone has light cover, and I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but it's certainly there, and now it's obvious that that's what they intended. Whereas in the last edition, it wasn't super clear.
Yeah. I think it also helps that the change of map facilitates that change. There's probably some things that they had commentary on for Vulcus, like no hatches in the floors and things like that, which would have made light cover from the floor a lot more punishing. If you could just Pop-Tart wherever you wanted.
Yeah, that's true. Vulcus is a much harder to move around map than people kind of expect. I think it's not intuitive that you need ladders to get onto the L-shaped ruins from the other side, because they're 4.5 inches most of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's basically a 5-inch climb. And then one thing that I think a lot of people mess up, especially when they're newer on Kill Team, is that no movement is free and your base must be placeable wherever you land. So if you cannot put your model down, so you move up 5 inches because the last half inch needs to get rounded up. You go over an inch, and then you try to drop down, because most bases are over an inch wide outside of, I think, Hand of the Archon and Veteran Guard, because there's not a lot of 25s left in the game.
Yep.
It's impossible to actually drop from the starting position onto an L-shaped ruin from the wall side. You got to go around the corners to the 4-inch tall climbs. And that's not intuitive for a newer player, especially because I had a lot of discussions way back in the day about traversing barricades, and people just assume that you pay 2 inches and you appear on the other side. That's not how it works. Every piece of movement is paid for in some way, shape, or form.
Oh yeah, that along with line of sight are the two things that I teach new players in training or practice games every single time is pay the penalty, measure horizontally. And if they can't do that, you can't finish it there. And it's just, that seems, for me, that's the easiest way to think about it, is subtract the climb, move horizontal.
One other thing that I like to be a big advocate for, and like teach new players and everything, is like if you are, I guess this is the tournament player in me, but if you are going to do a movement that is like a big deal, place a proxy model and then measure it and then be like, this movement is possible, and then once you agree, then you move the actual model.
Yep. Yeah, no, I really, when I'm doing casual learning games, I don't stress about those kind of things as much because those players may not want to be competitive, and we're okay with that.
Yeah.
But if you're practicing for tournament level play, if your goal is to win those tournaments, I teach people, like, don't touch your models unless you're planning on moving. Those GW wound counter bases, if I see them, I'm going to take them off when you're not looking, and I'm going to replace them with regular ones. Like, don't touch your models, please.
I think one thing that I like doing, especially because there's some like very, very tight measurements in really competitive games. So one thing for all the TOs or players who are just looking for a way to do a really, really tight measurement around a corner is use dice to basically frame out the inside and outside edges of vantage points or buildings. And that way when you can pick up the building and you loosely know where things go back. And that way you can measure right in the middle. And also, one of the most important things for playing very competitive high-level kill team is not to measure above your models. Always place your rulers and measuring widgets as close to the models as possible, because oftentimes 1 inch from an inch above the board will look like will look less than an inch. So you got to have it right next to your models to really know how far an inch is. And it really matters for blast stuff.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I've been lucky enough to have access to an industrial laser cutter. So I've made step tools available for all of my local tournaments. If they ask me for a measurement and they've touched their models, I can't give them an accurate one. So I really stress that at the beginning of the tournament. Don't touch your models if you're going to check a long distance measurement. And then I'll come over with step tools or a local player most people in the community know, Zach. He runs Disregarding Dice. His idea that we've been trying to get out the door is to take the Volcus layouts and make laser cut kind of maps to place over the table. And that way the terrain is marked. So we can pick it up and put it right back exactly where it goes.
Interesting. Yeah, I think everyone has different ways of doing it, and I think the most important thing for players is to just try to be as clear as possible when you're doing it. Like, obviously, if it's going to be within millimeters and you need it to be tight, then go grab a TO. But a lot of the times, it's not really 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters. It's generally like 3 millimeters, which is pretty obvious once you actually place things on the floor.
Yeah, I've never seen measurements that come down to like less than 2 millimeters in contention. And oftentimes, I mean, you play this game enough, you can eyeball those things. Especially when you're calling your opponent on it. It's like, I know how big these maps are. I know the distance from terrain to terrain because they're the same maps every time, especially Into the Dark made that really easy. So if somebody's moving just further than they could, it was easy to just say, nah, let's check that.
Actually, this is a fun one for In the Dark. Obviously, not all In the Dark maps and boards, the physical terrain, are made equal. Sometimes the boards don't sit flat. If anyone has gone to any GW tournament in the US, everybody knows that In the Dark terrain doesn't always sit flat on the board. So how does your scene interact with this? Because locally, I'm very blessed that all of the In the Dark terrain that we use at the Brooklyn Strategist mostly lays flat because, for whatever reason, we just got a good batch. And if you put them in correctly, they all will sit flat. Obviously at World and at Tacoma, wasn't always the case.
Yeah, I definitely remember that. I've been, yeah. It's hard to work that terrain when it's not prepped properly because you feel like you're going to break it in half. It's really sturdy though. But with our scene, I've because I run a commission studio and I interact with our players so much, I just was very big on telling them how to prep their Into the Dark terrain. So we don't have those issues. If anything, it needs to be like sticky tacked down because it's too loose. So I just line everything up with the pillars. It's easy for players to check that in the game because if something's off center, you just line everything up with the pillars on the board and go from there.
What happens with a pair of players basically come to you and they're like, well, I thought that I was obscured, and it's clearly because the board is listing to one side or the other. Do you tell the players, like, play it as it is, or do you tell them to play it as if it was where it's supposed to be? Because, once players have made moves, one of the things that you can do is just tell people to be consistent, or you could tell them to play it the way that it should be. I think that's one of the big things that a lot of tournament organizers have to deal with, because there's just the physical reality of In the Dark boards being kind of messy. And Volcus being messy too, because none of those measurements on those maps are perfect.
No, yeah, when designing the laser cut system, I definitely figured out that there's some issues. So you kind of have to get it as exact as you can.
The real secret for the In the Dark boards is that it is not going to be perfect in real life. So as much as you want it to be perfectly on the map layouts, none of those map layouts can be replicated exactly 1-to-1 because not all the terrain is exactly an inch thick or exactly 8 inches wide.
Yes, I agree with that completely. With the obscuring one specifically, I try to go off of intent. So if it was you're currently moving a model to be obscured or you're currently moving a model to take a shot, I try not to touch it as much as possible. If they're in the middle of those actions and can correct themselves so they have the movement to use, I'll move it back. But it's in that immediate action, it's kind of important to play it as is. But I mean, people bump the board all the time, so you can't get like walking over to people mid-turn and change their stuff and tell them that they have to play it differently. It's just not fair.
Yeah, I mean, that is a tricky one. I guess, like, from my perspective, there would be a couple things where, like, if the players agreed that when it's like, I position a model here, so I'm obscured against that target, and then later on, like, something got bumped and they're going to take a shot, and then they're like, hey, but remember, when I put him there, he was obscured, then, like, that should be clear, that should fly. But if it's like, if you moved over there, didn't say anything, thought you were obscured, or like, or just incidentally now are like, oh man, well, I'm probably obscured. But like the board is off or something. Like if there's prior communication, let it ride. If there wasn't, play it as it is.
Yes. And that's specifically why for my own play, I try to teach this to others. If you're listening, please do this. When you're moving a model, confirm with your opponent where your cover lines are. Like, really try, if your intent is to be obscured, say, well, I'm obscured from this angle, so it looks to me like if you want to shoot this guy, you're going to have to move a model over here. Here's my cover line. If you want to shoot this model, you're going to go over here. I'm trying to stay 1 inch back from this terrain to make it so you can't fight me through this wall or this barricade, but I'm still in cover. Do we agree? Because those gotchas, people aren't doing it maliciously. They're looking at it as trying to play off of a mistake you made. And if you didn't say it, it looks like a mistake.
Especially if you made a mistake.
Yes. But I've also had situations like that.
Jason is great at this because he played in cursors for the longest time. So everyone's like, I'm obscured. You're like, you're not obscured. Here, let me show you this cover line.
Yes, it turns out if your entire mechanism for being safe revolves around not using conceal orders and using obscurity instead, it's a very good way to get reps in on precision angles quickly.
Yeah, I loved that with Pathfinder's last edition. I'm just going to stand here and shoot you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that operative is absolute trash now.
Rip.
Pour one out for the transpectral Pathfinder, who now needs to spend an action point to get no obscurity.
I hadn't noticed that.
To be fair, I've been noodling around with Pathfinders in our local Kill Team New York League, which is being run by a different group in the New York area. And I have said that I'm going to play Pathfinders, and they're not good, but they are fun.
Yeah, no, they've got some fun little interactions. The drone controller changes are really interesting.
The drone controller is basically the whole team now.
Yeah, it's the drone controller, drones, and a bunch of Shaslas.
I don't know if the Shaslas are that good, I'll be honest, after noodling around with them, but the drones and the drone controller are very, very big, and now the weapons experts definitely feel way less important, so having extra railguns doesn't feel as necessary unless you're playing against the starties, but even then, I think that there's probably a big combo with the recon drone and the pulse accelerator, where you wait for your opponent to finish, then you move up your pulse accelerator and your recon drone, and you just nuke the ever-loving crap out of a Marine.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because let me tell you,
Is the pulse accelerator the plasma thing?
Basically, the recon drone has a pulse weapon. It's a burst cannon, which is 5 attacks on 4s, 3/4, ceaseless, heavy reposition, and punishing. But you can just have the drone controller shuffle him up, so you can move him 11 inches because the drone controller gives you 3 extra inches of movement. You can wait for your opponent to be in counteract, then send up a pulse accelerator and a recon drone far afield, do 5 attacks on 4s, 3/4, ceaseless heavy, punishing with the recon drone, and then also give it lethal 5 and severe from the pulse accelerator, and it basically can just get almost like guaranteed kill something.
Yeah, it's really effective, but once your recon drone's dead, the game's over.
As long as there's enough marker lights, you could probably make it through the rest of it. It just requires a lot of chewing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, hitting on 4s with a shooting team with just balance, it's not very consistent.
Oh yeah, I ran that map
Very
last
consistent
edition. It was bad.
Oh,
Yeah.
plus, like,
very
you've got
consistent at missing.
it's hard to stage all those models properly. In the giant menace of everyone's playing elites trying to double kill you, you got to be very, very careful with positioning in a way that you don't just give up a bunch of double kills.
Yeah. And one of the bigger problems in Volcus is that a lot of operas just can't be seen on turn 1. So Pathfinders live and die on whether or not they can see opposing models. And actually, a couple teams have visibility rules, so it's not super duper uncommon, but Pathfinders explicitly really need their opponents to be visible in some way, shape, or form to be able to stage the rest of the game.
Yeah, I still think that that's the one team, if you want to get better at positioning and intent, play Pathfinders. They're not good.
Unfortunately, as a horde team, it's almost always impossible for a new player to learn a horde team for the 2-hour mark of a tournament. It feels like there's just too many options.
Yeah, don't take them to a tournament. Never. Even if you're good at it. Just, it's not worth it. Unless you're playing for fun. If you're playing to win, don't.
Anyways,
yes.
What have you been playing, in the recent history? We talked about rules, getting a little bit of intent, but, obviously I'm sure players who are turning into the podcast this morning or this evening or whenever everyone shows up on Patreon, YouTube, or wherever, are curious about some in-depth rules things, and maybe what are some rules questions that you had about a team that you picked up on the newer side that took you a little bit of digging to figure out an answer for?
I played Yaegirs pretty much exclusively since they came out, and they have so many rules interactions. I would say I've never played a team with so many gotchas. And
they are a gotcha team, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's like,
they are not
I
in
do
the
this
best spot right now. So how have you been feeling about them overall in this edition?
Oh, once the data slate came out, I stopped playing them. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Jaeger players. But I had fun. It's just when you're playing a team where one of the win conditions is almost entirely impossible, it's not fun. It feels really frustrating. It is fun to, like, I guess having a chess clock would be your third win condition if you're playing Jaegers, because your opponent's going to play slow every single time. But their rules interactions are so specific, where they have a firefight ploy that allows them, if an enemy operative ends a move within control range of a Jaeger, and there's 3 layers to it that you have to triple check your rules that I've seen people get wrong. So if they end any movement in control range, it doesn't have to be a charge. You can use the ability. But the affected model has to be within 6 inches of the model that you want to shoot. That does not mean that the model you're shooting needs to be within 6 inches. So there's that second one. People think that they need to be within 6 inches of the model they want to shoot. Most of their guns are 6 inches, so I get it. But if you're using it with the rifle, for example, it's infinite range. You just need to be within 6 of the Jaeger you're charge blocking with. Then they have to minus from their ballistic skill when they do it. People miss that. And then the last one is because it's a shoot attack, they think that they need to be on engage before they use the ability. But it's just if you can perform a valid shoot action. So you have 3 silent weapons on the team. You can use any of those. And that alone was like 3 little layers where I've seen Jaeger players just get that wrong and think the ability is bad. But you have to set up the board specifically for it to happen.
And your opponent can play around it by trying to land within 1 inch of your opponent and also be not visible to whoever you intend to shoot with.
Yep.
Since there's only a couple of operatives that have longer than 8 inch or a 6 inch range that can actually hit you with -1 to hit and be threatening. You know, the Bombast being one of them, Riflekin being another. Yeah. And I suppose also the Jaeger Gunner because it gets ceaseless.
Yes, he would have ceaseless for that one because it's outside of his activation.
Yeah.
But those models would need to be on engage. They also have the Bladekin who can throw his limited throwing knife. You can use the tracker. I would not recommend that ever to use his hatchet. Throwing that on 4s just feels like you're throwing it away. Yeah, exactly.
Just Sam Fisher in the background with his tomahawk, throwing it around the corner and praying for a Call of Duty cross map knife snipe.
I mean, if the no kin token's down, there's a good chance you're going to chunk them. That's probably the most effective combo in the game. It's just really a lot of damage really fast, even on a bad roll. But that was like, here's how to read your rules correctly and make sure you're reading every single word. Don't skim it. Don't assume. The only thing that I've run into with them that like I actually straight up needed a TO for was that their mines do stay on the battlefield even after the Iron Break dice. And that was very early on in the edition. Just because that rule doesn't exist anymore, which is really great. It's very helpful. And then the other one that came up recently as more people are picking up Plague Marines is that and this one is straight up decided by who has initiative, but the Jaegers can use one of their resourceful points to heal, either 4 points on a warrior or D3 +1. But if you have poison and you're alive at 1 health, does the poison go first or does the heal go first? Because both timings say when this operative activates. And it's based on who has initiative.
That would be a tie. Yep, that would be very explicitly a tie.
Yeah, it's super frustrating as the Jaeger player because burning resourceful on healing is bad every time. Unless you're trying to like get above injured and it's the end of the game and you already have a shot in front of you. But if you're trying to live through a poison and you just can't because you didn't have initiative at the beginning of the turn, that really sucks.
That's true. Sometimes the rules do be brutal that way.
Yeah. I've got a similar silly kind of goofy one. The precursor from Aquilons attacking a bomb squig. And one of them is like immediately after the fight, you can dash away, and then the bomb squig also immediately explodes when it dies. That was one of the more interesting things that I came across. But that one is actually a little more cut and dry because the exploding bomb squig happens still within the fight action. And the dash happens after the fight action. So you're going to get exploded, and then it's going to dash away. But like, it's crazy just how many like crazy little things like that are just nestled all over this game.
Yeah, I was wondering about that one recently about the bomb squig. Is if that ability happens inside the fight action. But I wasn't sure, so that's good to know that it does.
Please hold.
Yep, I think that's going to double check this.
And in the meantime, here's a quick little spiel about Crossfire again. We will also have ad-free versions of the podcast available on Patreon.
Jason, how are you liking your Crossfire Games token set?
The Crossfire Games token set is absolutely amazing. I have a little Kill Team backpack that I put my Kill Team in, put all my tokens in, and now instead of having a bunch of little sandwich bags and a tin that I put my tokens in, I have it all in this nice little box with the scorecard and everything. So like when I unpack for a game, there's just the Kill Team and then this box, and it just feels so much more like mobile and organized. And like the quality of the tokens is really, really good. The like vibrancy of the colors is amazing. Super convenient to have all of the universal equipment in there as well. I am extremely impressed by it and very, very glad to have it. What about you?
Yeah, I think I was very impressed. Like, I agreed to kind of at least take a look at it. Having seen them at Worlds, I knew that the print quality was pretty good. But I think in person, the 3D printing, there's a lot of different kinds of 3D printing at this point, and I think FDM printing has come a long way. And the token set is quite nice, and it's nicer than the actual GW set, mostly because I can still see the tokens when they're off, just because they're black and not blue, dark blue that blends in with the board. So I appreciate that part. And I like that on the set that I have, there's room for like the specific tokens for your faction too, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, the faction tokens and the universal tokens and the like all of your basic order tokens and everything all fit in one little box that fits within the box. And with that, like you can probably even fit more. Yeah, it's pretty sick.
So definitely a fan of the product, and if anyone supports us, honestly, be great. I think my big thing is chaos boxes just make games take longer, and people got to play faster. And having organization definitely helps there. Having your engaged tokens in one spot and your concealed tokens in another, and like your recover items and all that other stuff. Organization makes for a cleaner game, keeps your brain in a better spot for playing, and I think these sorts of tools are great, whether it's Crossfire Games or other things. Having some organization is quite important.
Yep, definitely highly recommend it.
And back to the episode.
No, it's good because it matters if it's injured or not when it does the bomb squig death roll.
Yeah, I think the fight action ends, and then before the bomb squig is removed, it would explode because it's explicitly before it gets removed. So models get removed right at the end of the action, if I remember correctly, because you hit 0, and then you are removed, and the fight window drops. But like right as it drops, you explode, and then you get a chance to move.
Yeah, that's super useful.
Because I don't think you finish performing until the cleanup happens. But I could see reasonable minds disagreeing on this one. This is one of those things where I don't think it's a tie, but there is a fuzzy timing window that they could probably be more explicit about. Mostly because when operatives get removed is a fuzzy timing window right now, because in shooting and in fighting, they both call out that incapacitated operatives are removed at the end of the action. I think there's maybe room for someone to discuss on either end, but yeah. I think that the squig, should explode and then you get your dash.
Yeah, because that is at the end of the action, which does kind of still sound like it is the action, whereas I think the dash is like immediately after the fight action you can dash.
Yeah, you can immediately perform it afterwards. So I think it's got to fully finish resolving, and I think part of the resolution of the fight at the end would be the cleanup step of 0 health operatives, which would be when you explode.
Well, and what's I agree with that.
For something like door fighting, where door fighting you are explicitly in control range through the action, I think that the bomb squig explodes outside of door fight range because the 2-inch bubble drops off and then you explode. So you would no longer be in control range because you're in like the cleanup of the fight action. And I think those two are distinct windows. Kind of fun.
So you're saying you can hatchway fight a bomb squig that is not within your control range, so it's like 1.5 inches away, and then you fight it because of a hatchway fight, and it can't explode on you.
Correct, because you get removed at the end of the fight action, so that window basically drops off. And I'm pretty sure that one works. I've like stared at it a bunch of times. Maybe listeners can catch me if I'm wrong. We've been wrong a couple times in the last couple weeks, so
I'm almost
now we've got
positive
a larger
that one
Discord
works.
community.
Because I think that one explicitly works because the Bombsquig explosion is a blast attack. It does not reference anything about the blast being control range. It's the fact that it can shoot while in control range with that profile. And it says the explosion originates from itself. So if the Bombsquig's not physically within an inch and visible, it doesn't do anything. And that applies to strongholds and door fight, or like the stronghold doors as well.
Luckily for our Rekka crews, you can still make the explosion a little bit bigger, make it a 2-inch explosion.
Exactly. But you still need visibility.
Wait, can you make the Bombsquig explosion a 2-inch explosion?
Yeah, It's blast 1.
Oh, dang. I've never thought about that.
Anything with blast can be made bigger, which is why blast 2 is so spooky.
Yeah,
Let's turn that to
respect
blast
them.
3.
Blast 3 is real wild from the Rekkas. Anyways, I'm
Yaegirs
kind
have
of curious
blast 3.
about your experience on the Yaegirs, because I know that they're definitely in a very rough space, mostly from talking to local players who've been struggling to deal with the attack op selection, because it basically feels, from what I can tell, basically impossible, because you've got your 5-inch movement, which means that you're not able to do any of your infiltration attack ops with any sort of regularity. And your ability to crack power armor is not great in this edition. And the lethal 5-up on the plasma knives is not doing enough because you only have 3 attacks. So, like, now that you've stopped playing them, what are your most important learnings from your 3 months of suffering?
Longer. I played them since they came out.
Well, see, at least back then, at the end of last edition, there was like a golden moment where Jaeger were like decent.
Oh yeah,
and then the new edition dropped, and then they were removed from playability. And you've suffered for 3 months, it sounds like, since. So talk to us a little bit about the best tools that you were able to find, and maybe some spots where maybe you feel like there's more possibility for the Yaegirs that you have just decided is not worth exploring.
I think if you didn't look at the scoring system of the game, they're a very good team. They're not played the way people think that they're played, but they're still extremely good. You're not an aggressive team with your melee, except you have 3 operatives that have, the Thane, the Bladekin, and the Tracker are the only operatives on the team that have 4 attacks. That unless you take warriors. And the warriors hit on 4s when you take those 4 attacks. So in my experience, it's really not useful. What this team excels at better than any other team I've ever played is letting the opponent come into you and setting up the board in such a way where it's almost exactly who's going to charge who when they're going to charge them, because you can have a full forward deploy on the entire team. Then you can move 8 inches after that. So in theory, you could have the entire team on the center line if you wanted to. I don't recommend that ever. But what that means is because of staging and with them having super conceal, you are never getting shot unless you want to get shot. You can block pretty much every charge that you want to block. And if you don't want them, if they have access to a double charge, you can space out enough to where that's not an option either. So if a team reliably can double kill you, they can't now. And with their half damage ploy, most models in the game can't kill you in 2 hits, period. You need a 4/5 weapon with 2 crits, or you need a 4/6 weapon with 1 crit. And you need me to not parry one of those dice. That's a lot of relying on stats. It's just not going to happen. And if you only get 1 kill for that, it's not worth it most of the time, because the models that have those kind of damage have less than 10. So that's where Jaegers are just really fun to play and really exciting, because you're not looking at the game as an aggressive game. You're looking at the game as a denial game. You use your minds to make it harder to get charged. They're never going to go off unless somebody wants them to go off. And most of the time it's somebody moves into it or dashes into it, it explodes, and then they move back or dash back. That's the mind interaction you're ever going to have. Other than that, people are going to try to stage and avoid it, which is exactly what you want. Because if they stage, you just run up with a shotgun and shoot them in the face. Then you can create really interesting tempo where a warrior on turn 2 can be given one of the resourceful points and put onto an objective that's already been, let's say it's been looted, the center objective. You can move a warrior there with the resourceful, and against most of the teams in the game, they can't tap it next turn without killing that warrior. So like that blocks Hand of the Archon, all of the elves, from stealing an objective out from under you, even if they win initiative. And forcing players into doing like a non-beneficial aggressive action is really good. Because if they don't spike on that roll, they're probably not even going to kill that character.
And then Hernkyn Yaeger, because they shape the battlefield so much with their Iron Break, who's able to place 5 mine tokens that if they flip up, there's three out of the 5 mines can stop your opponent's action. So if you place them in front of places where your opponent's trying to charge, or you set up barbed wire so that your opponent is funneled into some of the choke points into mines, your opponent is forced into like these very awkward situations.
Yeah.
Do you have like sets of equipment that you pretty much always take just to help shape the battlefield?
Oh, absolutely. Almost every single game, it's razor wire, light barricades, and plasma knives are the 3 that I take every game. Then I'll take ladders sometimes. I'm not using them to go up on vantages. A lot of people have told me that I'm stupid for this. I told them to outplay me and show me, which is arrogant. But when you play the team enough, you realize that going up on a vantage with that team is just not good. You want to stay on the ground. You want to stay within 6 inches of your operatives. You want to be able to push forward if there's no shooting attacks available. Vantages don't allow that. It's really easy in this edition to just avoid vantage shots. But it's difficult to avoid a stalwart defense when you charge a model. So that's something I don't ever do, really. Smokes as well aren't super great for the team. Because they have to get within 2 inches of you anyways most of the time to shoot you, if you want them to shoot you. Like even if they have Seek, you know where and when you can block it. You can play Super Conceal for the entire team. That's better than a smoke. And that removes the Ignore Piercing, so the smokes aren't really great. I like the ammo cache for them, but it's mostly because they're an understated team that doesn't have a good access to rerolls. I don't think the ammo cache is a good equipment option in general compared to some of the others. But it's just, if you have a bunch of models who are hitting on 3s and they're really big threats and you only have one source of balanced from a strat ploy, you might as well get the free balanced on them as well. Or the free reroll, because it's not balanced, so you'd get both. That's where I lean into. Sometimes crack grenades, I guess. But they're really swingy. If you don't have good rerolls or you can't make the crack grenade hit on 3s, I don't think it's a very good equipment option.
Yeah, since you only have the 10 operatives and you're so slow, you want to make sure that when you do something, you've got some reliability there.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to take some wounds off the person, and I've had many attacks just not do anything. I've rolled, like for our melees, I've rolled 3 dice and gotten nothing. A lot.
And I think a lot of people on the Jaeger have, I assume, struggled against the Astartes matchups that have been so popular in this edition, because you're trapped with your 4 attacks on 4s, 3/4 lethal 5 knives, or 4 attacks on 3s, lethal 5, 3/5 lethal 5 knives, which are not reliably killing anyone. You might be able to stop an Astartes charge, and maybe you'll chip with a Riflekin in the background, covering 2 lanes. But afterwards, what has been the game plan to chew through the other Marines? Because I think right now, if Hernkyn Yaeger were switched over security, do you think the team would be like a B+ team? Would it be an A team? Because right now, between infiltration and seek and destroy, it's very hard for your team to either kill enough things for seek and destroy to be valid, or outmaneuver anyone for infiltration, right?
I think that either recon or security access to the team would make them extremely viable for sure. And yeah, Astartes, Legionaries before the changes were an unwinnable matchup on average, unless you just really spiked your damage.
And that's because Slaanesh was just made it so that you could never kill an operative ever, right?
Yeah. Unless you rolled a crit, you weren't touching them. It felt like you were playing Warcry. But those are the specific matchups. Inquisition's really difficult because of intense scrutiny, breaking super conceal. Those are taking away the Jaeger's tools are the way you beat them. And because they aren't consistent, they need every single tool to work exactly as it's supposed to, right when they need it to. Anybody that can get around the mines easily is difficult, but then that's usually elves, so they have 8 health, so you can chew through that with your shotguns. But that is where the difficult matchups are, is just if somebody knows what your game plan is or has tools to make your team just worse than they already are, you're playing a losing game, because the way you win with that team is making sure you max the crit up, trying to keep the kill up even or push for that last point at the end of the game, which is pretty easy for them with their abilities, and then playing for like 3 or 4 points on the tack up while trying to deny as many as possible. And yeah, a security team, they'd be amazing. Playing against them as a security if you take contain against them, you're just probably going to never get more than like 2 or 3 points on contain.
Yeah, because they'll like encroach on your territory and sit just within your zone and just trap you on the 3 points for contain, right?
Yeah, they'll have 2 models on the center. Like a Jaeger can have 2 models on the center line at the start of turn 2, and
with like 3 mines and 2 barricades and a barbed wire and 3 sets of covering fire, all waiting for you to come up and touch them.
Exactly. And if you ignore them too long, I'll use a resourceful point. Let's say I have the super conceal up if I need it, but I'll have a resourceful point and I'll just move dash that guy deep into your spawn, assuming that you have contain. There's no risk there, because if when I'm playing the Astartes matchup, I'm taking surveillance anyways. So that's my game plan already. Is just throw him as far back into your line as I can and then use surveil.
Yeah.
But
you've tried, I assume, everything on infiltration, and surveillance is still the best option just because it gives you the way to score a point that keeps you alive. Implant has not been good, I assume.
Yeah, it's a weird one with the team because of there are other teams that can do infiltration much better. Mandrakes, for example, can absolutely max surveillance every single game. But I look at that as I'd prefer to take storm objectives every single time if the map is good and the team doesn't make it impossible. Otherwise, I take surveillance if the map is good. And then if that's not an option, I'll take implant. But those
what
are
if you had the
3.
old edition of implant? You could do it on retaliation and not only on aggressive actions.
But then you'd have to do it 3 times.
It's true, but you could set it up. I just feel like surveillance, or I think that infiltration is just kind of in this weird spot where it wants you to play a little bit more defensively, and it sounds like it's a good idea for the Jaeger, but it turns out that a lot of the actions that you have to do put you in a pretty aggressive stance anyways. Implant being only fight actions means that you have to finish a charge and go tap someone and then keep them alive, which is kind of awkward anyways. And then surveillance wants you to stay alive while keeping your opponent alive.
Yeah, and you have to be wholly within their territory, which is usually not the place you want to be because all your equipment is on your side of the table. Those are the difficulties in it. It's 2 models can reliably kill a Jaeger. So if you go for surveillance too early or they have 12 models, they're gonna kill you. If you're playing against Astartes, it's good because they spread out, and if they turn back around to chase you, you're winning. But implant is just, I do it because it's an option and you can get 3 to 4 points off of it pretty consistently. Wiretap, don't take wiretap. Wiretap's bad. Maybe into Felgor. That'd be the only time I'd take wiretap. It's just, I don't know. The parallels between infiltration versus all of the other options are really, really, really bad. And then seek and destroy just seems to be either you're blooded or elites, or it's really difficult.
Yeah. I think it's
seek and
even
destroy
hard for elites.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's easier-ish because you can theoretically hit champion from time to time, but in general, getting 3 kills tends to be pretty hard, or 2 kills a turn with 1 model tends to be pretty hard.
Or staying alive with overrun is a lot easier on elites than it is for an 8 health model with a 4-up save. champion is a lot easier for them depending on the matchup. Storm objectives is way easier for Astartes. You know, if they have one model on their home objective, you just charge and double fight and it's yours.
Yeah.
And
You need to kill them. You could just kill one of them and stand there menacingly.
They can't be contesting.
Oh.
Yeah. For the objective to be stormed, you have to take control of it, and they cannot be contesting it anymore. So.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you also have to like stage you have to stage like multiple, because if you only stage one Marine to storm the enemy's home base objective, he's going to get smoked. If you stage two, you know, like you're encouraging the pressure to all go into one spot, and it's still not great for elites. Even though like elites do it better than anyone else, it's like, if as well playing elites, do I want to go for storm objectives or do I want to go for like take ground?
Yeah, no, I agree. And
to be fair,
it's easier.
Security and recon both feel a little overtuned right now in comparison to the other options, I think.
What I would love to see in general, just from a balance standpoint for them, because I know GW doesn't like to change the wording on things, or if the wording is changed, they don't want to change how it's played. I get all that. Just let everybody take whatever they want. Take away the restrictions.
Yeah, I like the restrictions personally. I think right now they probably just need to update. They probably just need to change infiltration a little bit. I think at least seek and destroy, you can make arguments for, but for infiltration right now, it's very, very skewed.
Yes.
And there's not actually that much choice, and I think that's kind of the issue.
Mandrakes are the only team I've ever seen that like love infiltration. That's it.
Commandos can do it too. Same shtick.
Who?
Commandos with the commando just like zip line.
Yeah, but unless you have some
fun if the Vespid could take infiltration, you just have them fly around and surveil.
That one is funny to me because they can't even plant beacons properly.
Nope, you gotta pay for it.
It's so
to be
silly.
fair, now with the new update on Vespid, you can probably make the argument that it's actually not that bad, because you have enough. I've watched players have enough community points where they could do it. You just don't fly. You just walk like a pleb. But everyone else walks around and drops it within 6 inches. So it's not like Vespid can't do it.
How does a Vespid walk? I want to see how that looks.
Very gangly.
Yeah. But yeah, that's been the hardest. Exactly. They just hop. They're skipping. But for Yaegirs, that's the big issue, is how to reliably win the game. You can make your opponent make a lot of mistakes. You can capitalize off of them. You can get some kills pretty easily, depending on the team you're fighting. But then when you need those 2 or 3 points and they're maxing plant beacons with it being their primary op, like, you're already down a lot. If they make even an average push onto the crit op, you're just going to lose. And that's the problem. Stat-wise, they're a decent team. They're just not a melee team anymore.
Yeah, in the old edition, having plasma knives just meant that you would just chew through people when they come into you. But now you're like, oh, maybe do 3 damage.
Yeah, it's strange to me that the warriors even hit on 4s when they take the 4 attack plasma knives. Like, you would think that would be a flex that they could have.
That's true. That would be an interesting flex if they hit on 3s at least. Then they would at least feel like a team that maybe has a plan and maybe could take warriors. But I think there has definitely been we started with warriors seem cool, and then like as things have changed and with the legionary warriors getting such a big nerf, it feels like maybe they're rolling back a little bit on having warriors be overly important.
I mean, you have to take 3 of them anyways.
That's true.
Yeah, it's just, would you rather have a crappy 3 attack knife with a 4/4 shotgun that hits on 3s, or the worst bolt pistol in the game and a mediocre knife that now has 4 attacks? Because the bolt pistol hits on 4s as well. It's not consistent. I don't recommend it.
True. As a Pathfinder player who has been noodling around with it in this edition, I pour one out for the hitting on 4s with balance homies, because it's not great out there.
Yeah, and then Yaegirs have like some of the worst. Like, everybody has hoops that they have to jump through for their strat plays, but my goodness, being in cover for shooting to get a shooting balanced is
Yikes.
probably the worst. Yeah.
Because it means that when you're running up to someone within 2 inches of them, you never get balanced.
Yep. And that's when you want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. And then their melee one is they either have to be the attacker or they have to be on conceal. And that's really bad.
Yeah, in
Right.
last edition, we used to have the defense characteristic where it would be like, you get 3 defense dice, and then they were like, wait a second, everyone should just always have 3 defense dice, and that went away and became a universal rule. I feel like that could be the same thing with hit skill. Could just make that all go away. Everyone always hits on 3s, and then if it's better or worse, there would be a keyword for that. So it's like, if you're going to be a shooter that hits on 2s, it'll be like expert shooter, and then like that's just a keyword, and you declutter, and there's no more hit stat. I don't know. That's just me being crazy, spitballing right now.
At least we don't have to deal with toughness and strength.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask my opponent before I roll my dice what's going to be successful on my dice roll. It's so dumb.
Different strokes for different folks. I think people like having that simulation in Warhammer 40k, and I think Age of Sigmar doesn't have it, which is kind of nice, but they do have strength and toughness for the wound type. But I think Age of Sigmar smooths out a little bit, and 40k is, it's not that granular, but it is more granular than all their other games.
Yeah, in 40k it makes sense. You're dealing with volume of dice. You've got to have a secondary way to reduce it. I get that. If I had to ask that, like, I've played Warcry. It's in Warcry. It's really bad. Because you're just playing kill team with less options. But I would prefer to just know what I'm rolling. I like the idea of everybody hitting on 3s, but then you're going to have like some wildly inconsistent damage results depending on the team. Like if Pathfinders hit on 3s again, they'd probably be like 3-5 damage on their weapons.
Yeah, if I could still hit on 3s, I think Pathfinders would be actively good right now.
Oh yeah, that was the one thing I saw when they moved over to 3rd. I was like, if we don't hit on 3s, this team's bad. And they didn't hit on 3s, and the marker lights didn't modify anymore. You need it. When you can't melee, you need the shots to kill people.
Yeah, I think it would be neat if I could get to 5 marker lights and get to 3, but it is what it is. And we'll pour one out, and I'll see if I can make it work, because I'm just curious.
I wish you all the luck in the world. I would love to see them remove the Seek Light.
Well, I lost my first game to Kroot, so we're not starting off in a good spot. But it was all, I did lose that game on my own.
Yeah, and
there were definitely enough mistakes that I let my opponent get away with, and it wasn't even the saturate stuff. It was just a couple of errant torrents and a couple of lazy positions and a couple of lazy mission actions, just because I'm pretty rusty. So it's workable. We'll see. I got my next game this week, so hopefully I get a chance to get some more practice, because I do think they're fun right now. They're just a very weird team, because they do not feel like the old edition, and it's very much how much can the drone controller hit the button and blow your opponent up, which is maybe not where I expected the team to be, but it's certainly very amusing. Because there is some fun stuff, like if your drone controller is 3 APL, you can marker light, double marker light, and then just blow someone up.
Yeah, no, that does still feel really good.
Whether or not that's good when you hit on 4s.
It's just hard to play cagey on that team with 3 objectives now. Positioning.
Oh, I don't actually think the Pathfinders are trying to play cagey. You just play like an aggro, kill up, confirm kill, pray.
Jeez. The cagey part is that you're missing half the time.
Run them down and gun them.
Yeah, it's everyone's got a gun that slaps, so the goal is to fire as many shots as possible downrange. Because if you play cagey, I think your opponent will just outscore you. So blow them up when they go touch the points, and then everyone else is out there marker lighting and slapping your opponent. And also, if you have enough visibility, depending on the map, turn 1 calling the Art of War for concealed marker lights is very, very powerful.
Oh yeah, no, that's been my game plan every practice game I've done with them. This edition is just try to get as many marker lights out as possible, move up the board with the people I know who want to hit hard, use recon sweep to get behind them. I'm not even playing around 2 marker lights on most people. It's like I'm fine with just balanced. If I can beat your cover lines, I want to rain fire into you.
Yeah, getting up to 2 is the most important number now. And then sometimes you hit obscurity, because Seek Light is pointless on Volcus.
Yep. I would.
But on In the Dark, ooh, Seek Light. That's the now Pathfinder. Like, oh, we're going in the Gallant Dark. Let's go, rack up, boys. Because Volcus is hard.
They really love Into the Dark and Beta Decima. They're big fans of Beta Decima.
R.I.P. Beta Decima.
I had to play it at a tournament 2 weeks ago. Shout out to the Vancouver, BC Kill Team scene. They're really just wonderful people. I tried for an entire week to get them to not make a Volcus or a Beta Decima map. I brought terrain just in case. They still did it. The TO Colin, great guy, he said if I got matched on that terrain, I wouldn't have to play it anymore that day. I told him I was coming for practice, so if I got that terrain, I was just going to concede, which he laughed at, but I was totally serious. And then I got paired on that map the first game. And it was against somebody that I knew from Tacoma Opens and stuff like that, named Rodrigo. He's a really great guy, and I was like, I can't concede against him. He's a great player. So we played it out, but the Felgor managed to pull out a win on Beta Decima against Angels of Death. A lot of things went my favor in that match, including only one Assault Intercessor being on the table. I think that played more of a role than the terrain itself.
Yeah, Beta Decima is, after running it at New York Open, I've decided not to really try to push it because the only terrain that had feedback that people didn't like it was Beta Decima. So even though it's improved, I think it really just needs more terrain, which we're never going to get a chance for. So I think if you want to run Beta Decima in a local scene, I think the biggest advice I could offer is throw in a couple supply crates, just add some more terrain to it. Because I think if you add, 2 pieces of terrain that are about the size of one of those gantries, the map tends to be pretty playable.
Oh yeah, it was great because Colin the TO set up all the narrative terrain from the first box.
Yep,
and that made it awesome. The shot glass canister is actually a very cool piece of terrain. It has a lot of interesting movement lanes. It opens up part of the map to be usable. The big supply crates give you extra obscurity lanes, which don't exist on parallel gantries. So really, if you want to make Beta Decima work, chuck on some more terrain. It doesn't have to be the actual terrain, because any extra terrain will make it both, 1, more interesting, and 2, make it look cooler. Because the biggest advantage of Beta Decima is it looks sick as hell for any new players. It just plays like dog water with the contents of the one box. No, I agree. I also highly, highly recommend using the Beta Decima objective markers because they do count as heavy cover.
Yeah, you always have to use those as cover. You can't not have if you have flat circles, you're dooming your local scene to let's see, just shooting dominance. I don't know what version of your opponents are just going to have the worst time, even with 2 light barricades and a heavy barricade. Although maybe now 4-inch wholly within a heavy barricade on Beta Decima helps.
I used it. It was really good. No, I think that terrain set without anything on it and no objectives would feel like you're just playing Unreal Tournament. Just killing each other.
Without respawns.
Yeah, exactly.
Or maybe, you just go all the way around, play a narrative game where you do respawn. You just play team.
That'd be kind of fun.
That could be a fun narrative mission. We're gonna play
team deathmatch
in 40K. The goal is to get as many kills as fast as possible, and you're playing in real time.
No turning points. Just keep going until there's no models left
and no player activation skill. You just actively move your models as accurately as possible.
You're like rolling dice while you're also measuring a movement on the other side of the board.
Like this guy over here, he's shooting while this other guy.
You're both shooting each other at the same time and rolling defense dice at the same time against the same model.
That'd be incredible.
Yeah, then we really figure out when the incapacitate actions happen.
All right. Well, Shawn, thanks for dropping by and talking about your upcoming tournaments. Good luck on your upcoming golden ticket event, March 8th, 9th. Are there any other, local scenes that you want to give a shout out to our listeners, especially because we have Pacific Northwest people out here and people all the way around the world who tune in. So give us a little shout out for what's coming up, your local scene, and anything else.
Yeah, no, if anybody wants to catch up on what we're doing in the Pacific Northwest, the biggest place to go is the Kill Team Cascadia Discord. They run events out of Oregon all the time. Look up Kid Zero Crew on Patreon. His battle reports and tournament advice and training that he does is incredible, super invaluable. Could not ask for a nicer person to be like a high-end teacher in the Kill Team community. If you're ever up in the Bellingham area, come visit us. But our tournament is the 8th and 9th. Look on BCP for the Cascade Clash, and you'll find it. If you want to,
and we'll have links in the show notes for anyone who.
I appreciate that. But yeah, those are the big areas. I'm not a big social media person, so give all that love to the local scene and my friends. I appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, well, thanks again for coming on.